justice in the communities all across the country. And it seems like whether you were more a group that would engage in violence, or if you were a group that was focused on remaining peaceful, it seemed like either way you were looked at and scrutinized and possibly finding ways to put criminal charges on these organizations. And since you was affiliated with one of these groups, they tried to, or they did actually, charge you and try to send you to death, right? And you got that second death sentence overturned.
Yes, because the same thing I was doing in the streets, the same thing I was doing in prison when I was getting to change my way of thinking, trying to turn my life around, but to be an asset to the community and still being a pariah in the same community that I come from. We use the same tactics in court. We used the history of the death penalty and different cases that were taking place. What's her name? Constance Baker? What's her name? She was one of the attorneys who was part of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, which is a different organization from the NAACP. Okay. They was the organization of attorneys who came to help the NAACP. Right. But they called themselves the NAACP Legal Defense Committee, and that was their name, but it was a separate organization. And Thurgood Marshall and Constance Baker, and there was a whole lot of them. Considerably at that time, attorneys who represented Martin Luther King, they was part of that.
So when you were fighting those cases, once you got the death penalty or the death sentence overturned, did that lead to your release, or did it lead to a reduced sentence?
It led to a reduced sentence, and they were so pissed off about how they had to release me eventually, since I didn't die in prison in some kind of way, that I had to agree to an extra illegal sentence. But where the law is, you can be convicted under an illegal sentence if you agree to it, because it becomes a contract under contract law.
So you accept it?
Yes, it was a contract. The judge didn't sentence me. I agreed to it in a contract with the government representatives. Right. So it was an extra. I ended up getting 74 years, which was an extra. I was facing a maximum of 60 years. Okay. Well, 60 years wasn't good enough, because I almost had 30 years in it.
Right.
So they knew I was getting ready to get released. They did not want to see me walk out the courtroom. First of all, they thought I got a powerhouse attorneys, and they thought that they was gonna lose this time around. So they made the deal so that I would not walk out the courtroom.
Right.
For people to see this, that if you stand tall, you be strong, and you resist oppression, and you hold the real concept of justice, true justice, and you help people regardless of whatever. They don't want that, because that was the image that I had cultivated without even knowing it, because I was doing it. Right. And then I was getting ready to get released. They said, "Oh, we can't have this." So I agreed to it. But they said that if I accept these extra 10 years, then I can fight my case in federal court, and I won't have to admit anything. So I fought my case in federal court. Jesse did the habeas corpus for me. She did. And I fought my case in federal court, but I ended up with a judge from Lake County who was part of the judge clique, because the judge that I had for my first trial was to be a U.S. attorney in federal court in Lake County. I ended Alfred W. Mullery. He's deceased now, but he used to be a U.S. attorney for 12 years. So when I went to Fort Wayne in a change of venue from Lake County, from Lake County to Allen County in Fort Wayne, I got that judge. So I ended up. You remember when about the crack cocaine, powder cocaine disparity, where you had an organization that was, I think it was out of Michigan, and then it grew. It was called Moms for Mandatory Minimums. Right. Well, you had a lot of people that was in jail for a lot of time. Some had life sentences for small amounts of crack. And here's a person get caught with a whole kilo of cocaine, powder, and powder cocaine, and you had a couple of $20 rocks, gram a piece, man, I think. Then you facing more time than someone who got caught with over a pound of cocaine or heroin, whatever it was.
And the only reason to come to that conclusion as to why that would happen like that is because minorities are more commonly associated with that small amount of crack, you know, whether it's a gram, couple grams, 3, 4 grams, you're still looking at 20, 30, 40 years under certain circumstances. And I know personally people who have got caught with 4 kilos, but it's all powder. And they end up doing 3, 4 years in the feds, tops, for 4 kilos, you know? So anytime 4 $20 rocks can carry this amount of time, but literally 100 times that amount, and you add baking soda, and now, you know, the sentence is greatly reduced. I mean, you can see that it was directly targeted for minorities, you know.
Plus, and another reason why it was because it was so cheap. You know, you can pay $5 for just a little. You get a rush sensation of some type, and it was cheaper because the cocaine was the rich jet set drug, and when they was able to find ways to really reduce the amount and then have it where it can be smoked instead of snorting them in your nose or something, and you get a sensation that will last for about 15-20 minutes. Then you want to do it again, but you never get that same high. So you trying to get that same feeling you got or euphoria to try to whatever kind of problems they was having, whether it was at home, whether what we call it, postpartum depression or whatever, you know, and what you're going through, so you're not getting any treatments through the system. So you self-medicate for various reasons, you know, and it was widely, so it was easy to put these boogeymen up here with these dark faces and blame them for the problem. And that was going on, it was widespread.
I got one more question really before I open it up to the audience here, but because, you know, that was up to the point of, thankfully, you overturning those sentences and getting out. But what have you done? How long have you been out, actually?
I've been out for 5 years now.
Been out for 5 years now. That's great, man. Congratulations. But also, how you've been out for 5 years? What have you done in that period, that time period?
The BLA, it's called the Black Liberation Army, became defunct in 1981, around October. That was when the last major cadre was captured. And one of the members from the anti-terrorist task force, Tim Blanc, he was just released recently. And so we had we had no other recruits. Young people was not being involved in things, so we was a lot of old people out there doing things that, you know, young people we was doing when we was younger. You know, then I became older. I did most of my time in prison. Although I was 25 and I was arrested, I was 62. No, I was 26 when I was arrested, and I was 62 when I was released in February 6, 2017. So the things I was doing when I was younger, I don't have the physical ability to do as much like that anymore. So what I've been doing is try to, but we don't have a national structure. We have a national structure above ground or underground anymore. So we all started doing various things. Some joined the church, and we still was doing activist work, but we using different methods and tactics to do it. So now I've got myself involved into the reentry program in Gary, Indiana. It's a serious need, and that's what I'm doing now.
That's great. That's great. So what does that involve?
Well, it's helping people, helping people walk with them and help give them any assistance they may need being released from prison to cut down on recidivism. I was able to make it because I had a good support system who started out as my defense committee. So my defense committee became my support system when I got out of prison. So it was through them that I was able to stay the course not fall into these pitfalls and be back in prison. But if it wasn't for that, I probably would have. You know, they kept the cheat off me a lot, and they helped me a lot. There's a lot of things. If you ever, anybody ever watched it's an old movie called Return to the Planet of the Apes. And I use this analysis because that's what happened to me. You know, I came back, and it was like a bombed out bomb shell crater. It was like a war zone. It had been a war zone. I'm looking all around and all this, and I'm like, what? And I didn't know my way around. I had to learn my way around again. But it was as though it's like it's my first time being here. But all alone, like when Charleston Heston was running, trying to escape to get away, and he fell on the beach, and the apes was gaining on him to throw the net on to capture him, and he looked up and saw the Statue of Liberty halfway buried in the sand. You know, it's like, what happened? And he said, oh my God, you know, and then the camera went to the Statue of Liberty, buried up to his neck, the little torch holding up a little bit. And that was kind of the feeling that I had when I came back to Gary. I came back to a place that had been devastated, like an apocalypse.
You know, I'm from Gary. I went to high school in Gary. And, you know, last time I was in Gary was one time before I was in Gary. Last time I was there at that time was like 98, 99. And I didn't even return back to Gary until I think like 2010, so maybe 12 years the most that I was away. And when I came back after 12 years, I could not believe what I saw. Literally potholes, and they were always out there. But big as this table, you know, and complete the whole downtown, completely empty. Not one store, broken windows, boarded up, no businesses. Maybe a Taco Bell and a Payless store, you know. That's it, and a police station, and a courthouse. You know, that's it. And so I can just imagine, and I was away for 10 years, but to think about your situation from 26, jumping 40 years in the future, I mean, that's a whole completely, I mean, I was shocked, so I can imagine how it must have looked to you, you know.
To add on to what he's got to saying, this happened in every city where there was a so-called, they call it inner city now is the term for ghetto. Ghetto is not a place that exists anywhere. Ghetto is a term, I don't recall the name of it, the meaning of the word ghetto, the origin. I don't remember, but it was where a particular group of people is confined to a particular area because of their economic circumstances or some other arterial conditions that may have existed, you know. So it was called a ghetto. So when you hear the word ghetto, it does not mean slum.
Right.
You can be in a high or high economic area, and that could be the ghetto. If you are confined there, it's a distinct group who's been set apart for special treatment.
I think I think that term was used in the Holocaust.
Yes, it was. It's called, you know, the ghetto. Yes. But because they was confined in that area, but it had nothing to do with ghetto slums, nothing like that. But as time went on, it became associated with that. And every city where there was a so-called minority mayor or black mayor, they were actually puppets, or they were not outright sellouts. They were people who were manipulated with a pipe dream that now things can get better. The conditions in all those cities were the same, but those cities were made dependent upon those poverty program money. The war on poverty was supposed to have been to balance out, make it was level playing field. But the money was diverted to the Vietnam War. And all you had was these people who got elected to office, and it was their responsibility, or they accepted their responsibility to give a humanitarian face to their conditions of oppression. What people call racism is only the ideas and